World to me. He was my idol, my best friend. He died, 5 years ago from COVID-19, right at the height of the pandemic. And what I learned, through my grief journey is that, the way my father died was unique. It was very traumatic, and, there's just so much post-traumatic stress associated with it because, he got COVID right at the beginning in April of 2020. And we were in lockdown at that point. So when he ended up in the hospital, myself and my family were unable to see him. We were unable to communicate with him. This was completely new territory for all of us. We never had experienced anything like this. Now our loved one, my father is sick, dying in a hospital where we can't see him. We can't talk to him. We can't, like I said, see him. It's this unprecedented, unorthodox situation that none of us knew how to navigate. And we're terrified because the world around us seems like it's succumbing and crumbling to this virus. And our loved one, my father, is personally succumbing to it. Unfortunately, he ended up passing away after 7 days in the hospital. And not only was that difficult, but what was difficult was the lack of answers, because we were in an unprecedented situation where the medical community did not have any answers to what was going on, to what the virus did, and how it was affecting people, killing people, and how it killed my father. All they knew was that unfortunately on the 7th day at about 4 a.m. he ended up having a massive heart attack. They tried to resuscitate him and they couldn't. So, the lack of answers, the fact that we didn't see him, we couldn't communicate with him. Basically, what I'm trying to say is my loved one, my father, contracted this virus, left my home, and I never saw him again. He was dying by himself, alone in a hospital, and I was not able to be there or see him. And I had no answers. Then, what made it even more traumatic and traumatizing and just unorthodox was that, I'm Catholic, and there was no way to have any type of traditional funeral to say goodbye to my father or the rest of my family, because they didn't allow that. The lockdown protocol was they were just going to take his body and they were going to cremate it. And we couldn't have a funeral. In the Catholic religion, we believe that even if you're cremated, that you should still be buried. So we were even being denied our religious beliefs, and it was just trying to reconcile the just overwhelming emotions of grief that you're going through with the fact that you can't do the things that you associate with the passing of a loved one, a funeral, a burial. You can't do any of that. Thankfully, my father worked for a funeral company in Brooklyn, and his friend, who's the funeral director, was able to get his ashes and give us a proper urn and at least deliver my father back to me. But I've had to learn that the trauma and the PTSD associated with that, because the problem was when I went to Griefshare, because I had no idea how to grieve. How do you grieve in a situation like that where your father is just snap of the fingers gone and you've had no way to grieve? And remember, it's lockdown, so I can't go outside. I can't see friends. I can't see other family. I have no way to do this. And a friend of mine recommended Griefshare to me. And what Griefshare did for me was they allowed me to actually be able to understand and try to put in words and articulate my feelings and emotions that I was robbed a proper grief of my loved one. I was robbed the funeral. I was robbed the proper emotions and experience. And that was really, really difficult. And that added to this just traumatic grief journey. But what Griefshare did for me was it brought me together with a group of people that shared what I was going through, that allowed me at such a dark and difficult time to process my emotions, but in a way where I understood what I was going through. The way they broke it down, Griefshare, was I actually could put meaning and words to what I was going through and really understand it and try to find a way to kind of go through it somehow cathartically, where it wouldn't consume me and eat away at me, which it was. It was just, tearing me apart. But I think what's also important, what Griefshare did, was it brought me closer to my faith to God. And the combination of faith and, I'm not somebody that really went through the scripture my whole life. I mean, besides the key things that we know for Christmas and Easter. And this allowed me to actually go through the Bible and actually experience understanding it, reading it, learning it, and applying it to what I was going through. And it brought me so close to God, and it gave me a way to lean on God and try to lean on my faith to kind of get through what I was going through. And I've been faithfully with Griefshare every week for the last 5 years. And it's a part of my life that I don't think I'll ever give up, because what they've done for me is hard to quantify in words. They saved me. I mean, quite frankly, they saved my life. They really did. And I think one of the biggest challenges was that I was hit with COVID-19 myself not long after my father passed. And I went through, and I'm still going through a really challenging medical journey. And I don't even know how to quite explain that because I don't understand it myself. But I contracted COVID. I was very ill. And then shortly after, I end up with a medical condition that nobody could tell me what's wrong. And I'm dealing with the loss of my father, the grief journey. I'm dealing with COVID and the pandemic, okay? And now I'm trying to go on a journey of figuring out why I'm getting more sick and more sick and more sick. And I was dealing with not just illness, but chronic pain that was shutting me down, that was making me unable to actually just function. And nobody could give me an answer. And I was bouncing back and forth between, this hospital and this specialist and that specialist. I was going all over New York, and I felt like a lab rat, to be honest with you. And nobody could give me an answer. And I was getting worse, and it consumed my life. And what became difficult was being finally diagnosed and told that I had a form of cancer, and then being treated for that, and then being told that I now have a condition from all of this that I'm going to be living with potentially for the rest of my life, that doesn't have a cure, that will affect all facets of my life, because it is a chronic pain situation. And I was told that I had a form of a cancer in my bladder and prostate, and it ended up affecting my bladder and just, functionability in a way that was just chronic pain. And it ended up changing my life, and every part of my life. And I'm still dealing with it. It's still something that I'm dealing with. So when I decided to make this movie, it was because in Griefshare, one of the most helpful tools that they use is they try to tell people to write, to journal. And I was having a lot of trouble doing that, which is ironic because, I write screenplays. But journaling about myself is really difficult. And my facilitator, Brian, had suggested to me that I write it as a story, as fictional characters, and I write it as a movie. And that really helped me. And quite frankly, it worked. And I ended up writing a movie that I'm just so proud of, And I went on a journey with that. But that journey led me to where we are now, which was, I said, let's do this. Let's tell this story, what I went through and what people I know went through that I met from my grief group, but more importantly, what grief looks like and how spirituality and faith can really help you, conquer it. And that's where One More Time came, and that's the struggle of my journey with chronic illness and grief.